Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I stepped into the backyard, letter from the fire academy clutched in my hand. It was a spring Saturday, sunlight spilling across the grass, the smell of grilled meat thick in the air. My brothers were standing by the grill, cans of beer in hand, laughing about something I couldn't hear. Mom was already tipsy, sprawled in her chair with her usual glass of wine. The whole scene felt too familiar, like nothing had changed. I took a breath, unfolded the letter. I got in, I said, barely able to believe the words myself. Before I could even savor the moment, Dad was there. He snatched the letter from my hands without a word, tearing it to pieces like it was nothing. His eyes locked on me, cold, unwavering. "You think you're gonna be a firefighter?" he spat. "It's a joke. You won't last a month? You'll embarrass this family." My chest tightened. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. He didn't care. He turned and walked away, tossing the shredded paper in the air like confetti, not even looking back. That night, when the game was on and everyone else was inside, Dad pulled me into the garage. I wasn't expecting anything good, but this was worse. He started yanking down the framed pictures from the shelf. Birthday photos, one from my high school graduation, a shot from when I broke my arm in Little League. It felt like he was stripping me of every memory, every ounce of connection I had to this family. "You're not part of this family anymore," he said, tossing the frames into a box like they were trash. "If you won't listen, you're out." I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I didn't go back inside. I just stood there, staring at the empty shelves, the sounds of the game muffled through the walls. The weeks dragged on, each one blending into the next. I kept my head down. I was living in a tiny sublet, the rent cheap enough that I didn't have to work myself to death just to keep a roof over my head. I spent most of my time at the bowling alley, picking up doubles just to pay for the basics. The weekends blurred. The BBQ, Dad's words, all of it felt like an anchor I couldn't shake, sinking deeper with each passing day. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw an unfamiliar number. It was my dad's lawyer. He got right to it. "You've been removed from the will," he said, tone flat, like he was giving me news about a car insurance claim. "No explanation, just wanted you to know." I didn't know what to feel. It was a clean cut, no warning, just done. That same week, I got an email. It was from the Community Service Award dinner for my dad. I'd been invited to attend, to watch him get the recognition he'd spent his whole life collecting. A chance for us to both be there, side by side. It was supposed to mean something. The subject line read, "Change in guest list." I clicked it. "Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we've had to adjust the guest list," it said. "You are no longer invited." I stared at the screen for a long time, but I didn't feel surprised, just hollow. That was Dad's way, wasn't it? If you weren't on his terms, you didn't exist. And in his eyes, I never had. I started taking down the photos I'd brought with me, the ones from birthdays, from holidays, anything that reminded me of who I used to be in that family. I didn't cry, not this time. I just got quieter, more isolated. It was like the space around me was getting smaller, the world outside slipping further away. Every morning before my shifts at the alley, I'd go for long runs. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. My body felt the pain, the strain of each step, but it was a different kind of hurt, a good kind, a focused kind. And when I pushed myself, my mind wandered back to that letter from the fire academy, to what it had meant, to how it felt to see my dad rip it to pieces. The runs weren't enough to drown out the feeling, though. A couple of days later, I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Delgado's number. He'd been my high school guidance counselor, a former firefighter who switched to teaching when his body couldn't take the grind anymore. He was one of the few people who understood me, who saw me beyond the walls my dad had put up around me. I'd never expected to call him, but I needed to talk to someone who didn't know me from that house. I needed someone who'd see me for what I was trying to become. When he picked up, his voice was familiar, low and steady. "Mr. Delgado, it's me," I said, clearing my throat. I need your help. You're not going to believe this." He didn't interrupt as I told him everything. The letter, the BBQ, the will, the email. When I finished, he paused for a moment. "You don't need the academy," he said, calm like he'd already known where this was headed. "There's another way in." I waited. "What are you talking about?" He exhaled slowly. "There's a program through the fire department, cadet training. You get in, they sponsor you, but you have to earn it. No shortcuts, no guarantees." I felt a spark. It was something different, but it felt like the door wasn't fully closed. You think I can do it? I know you can, he replied without hesitation. You've got the heart for it. I hadn't even realized I was holding my breath until I let it out. For the first time in weeks, there was something real to hold on to, something that wasn't tied to the wreckage of my family. All right, I said, the words coming easier. Let's do it. The next morning, I showed up at Station 14. The place smelled of smoke and oil, the kind of scent that lingered in your clothes and skin for days. I stood in front of the garage doors, my heart pounding a little harder than I expected. Delgado was there, waiting for me. He gave me a nod and led me inside. We walked past the truck bays, where fire engines and equipment were lined up, gleaming in the overhead lights. Chief Barrett's expecting you, Delgado said, leading me into an office in the back. Chief Barrett was a big guy, solid muscle under his uniform, with a face that could have been carved from stone. His handshake was firm, but not the crushing kind. He looked me over for a second, like he was weighing whether I belonged there or not. You've got a lot of guts showing up here, kid, he said, his voice deep, gravelly. This isn't a damn charity. We'll test you, and if you can't make it, we won't waste our time or yours. I didn't flinch. I'm here to earn it, I said. He leaned back in his chair, sizing me up. It's a long shot, no guarantees. You pass the physicals, prove you've got the grit, we'll sponsor you. But if you fail, that's it. I nodded. I understand. Delgado stepped forward. He's got the heart for it, Chief. Barrett raised an eyebrow, like he was thinking it over. We'll see. The next 6 weeks were pure hell. I ran with a weighted vest, climbed stairs in full gear, dragged hoses up flights of stairs until my arms felt like they were going to snap off. Every morning, I was sore. Every evening, I barely had the energy to crawl into bed, and some of the guys dropped out. There were days when I wanted to quit, when every muscle in my body screamed for me to stop. But I didn't. It wasn't that I was stronger than the others. Hell, I wasn't even in the top half. But I refused to give up. I kept pushing, kept grinding. Even when I was on my hands and knees, fighting for breath, I wouldn't stop. Not because I could, but because I had no choice. The physicals were brutal, but I passed every one. One by one, I checked off the boxes, the hose drills, the stair climbs, the sprints, and through it all, Chief Barrett was watching. He never said much, just kept his eyes on me. But when I finally passed the final exam, he pulled me aside. You've got grit, he said, his voice low and approving. We can teach the rest. You've earned your shot. He extended a hand and I shook it, feeling the weight of the moment. Welcome to the team, he said. We'll get you into the city's fire training course. The real deal. I didn't hesitate. I'm in. It wasn't the easy way. It wasn't the way I thought I'd get there. But I was finally on the path, and I wasn't going to stop now. The next 16 weeks of training were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and frustration. They threw everything at us, yelling instructors, gear drills that felt like they'd rip your arms off, endless nights spent poring over fire science textbooks until I could barely keep my eyes open. My gear was never quite right. The jacket chafed my neck, the helmet dug into my temples, and the boots, God, the boots, rubbed my heels raw every damn day. Blisters became a constant, but there was no time for sympathy. The physicals were brutal. The mental stuff was even worse. It wasn't just the climbing or the dragging hoses or the sprints. It was that nagging voice in your head, the one that told you to quit, that you weren't cut out for this. It was the heat of live burns, that thick, suffocating air that felt like it was trying to choke you out. The first time I stood in front of a burning structure, flames licking at the windows, I flinched, feeling the heat curl around my face. My instincts screamed at me to back off, to get out of there. But I pushed through it, step by step, like the rest of the cadets. I didn't think, just moved. There were nights I couldn't even remember getting to bed. I'd crawl under the covers, muscle aches pulling me in every direction, but it was never enough. The next morning, I'd be right back in the shit, dragging myself up another ladder or carrying another weight, hoping my body would hold up. One night, after an 18-hour day, I found myself alone in the locker room, the air heavy with sweat and the scent of burnt rubber. The lights were dim, and the low hum of the building was all I could hear. I sat on a bench, stripped out of my gear, letting the sweat soak into the bench beneath me. My shoulders were killing me, and I just stared at my reflection in the mirror, not sure if I even recognized the guy staring back. Dad's words came crashing back into my mind. You'll quit. You'll embarrass this family. They cut through the silence like a knife. I didn't quit. I wouldn't. But some days, that voice, that doubt, it got louder. And it wasn't just his voice anymore. It was my own gnawing at me, asking if I was really going to make it through. I thought about the letter, about how he'd ripped it apart, laughed in my face, about how every step of this journey felt like a fight to prove him wrong. I wanted to believe I wasn't doing this just to spite him. I needed to believe I was doing it for myself. I shook it off, stood up, and pulled on my gear for the next round. It wasn't about anyone else. It never had been. The next morning, we hit the ladder climb. I wasn't the fastest, but I nailed it. Every step steady, every movement deliberate. That afternoon, we did a simulated rescue, a dummy, trapped under debris. My heart raced as I pulled it out, checked for signs of life, performed the motions exactly like we'd been taught. I was fast, precise. The trainer gave me a nod. "Good work," he said, then moved on to the next cadet. The days blurred together until graduation was finally on the horizon. We'd made it. The ceremony was short, just a few words from the instructors, a few handshakes. When it was my turn, Chief Barrett stepped forward, pinning the badge on my chest. "You earned this," he said, looking me straight in the eyes. The hard way, I felt the weight of the badge. It wasn't a promise of what was to come. It was a symbol of everything I'd fought through to get here, to prove myself, to prove that I wouldn't quit. As I stood there, feeling the pride settle in my chest, I realized it wasn't just the badge that mattered. It was the work I'd put in to earn it. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I had nothing left to prove. I was assigned to Station 18 in the city's industrial corridor. The area was rough, filled with warehouses, old factories, and a constant churn of cars and people moving in every direction. Fires, car wrecks, overdoses, you name it. It was there. It felt like a new world, a different kind of chaos than training had prepared me for. No drills, no controlled burns, just real, ugly heat. My first call came after a few days, a warehouse fire. We were the second unit on scene, and the smoke was already pouring out, thick and black, swallowing the sky. I grabbed my gear, heart pounding, trying to keep it together. I wasn't ready for this, not really, but I wasn't going to back down either, not now. My partner, Marty, was the seasoned one. He didn't say much, just gave me a quick nod, and we headed toward the building, the air thick with the smell of burning rubber and metal. The visibility was zero. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The radio crackled with orders, voices shouting through the static. We pushed forward, the heat intensifying as we got closer. The building creaked and groaned, like it was about to collapse on top of us. The ground beneath our feet felt unstable, shifting with the weight of the fire and the wreckage. I kept my head low, following Marty's footsteps, trusting him to lead me through the smoke. Then I heard it, someone shouting. It was faint, lost in the roar of the fire, but there. I looked around, disoriented. My heart kicked up a notch. Marty raised his hand, signaling, then pointed toward a pile of collapsed shelving. "Someone's trapped," he shouted over the din. We scrambled through the debris. The worker was wedged between broken metal and crates, barely conscious, his face covered in soot. He wasn't moving. The flames were crawling up the walls, licking at the ceiling, and we didn't have much time. "On three," Marty said, his voice steady, like we weren't standing in the middle of an inferno. 1, 2, 3. We hoisted the man up between us, careful to avoid the sharp edges of the wreckage. I could feel the heat in my face, the sweat dripping down my neck. Every step was a gamble, one wrong move, and the whole place could come down on us. We made it out of the building just as the fire shot higher, the sound of crackling wood and snapping metal echoing behind us. The worker was breathing, but barely. We got him to the paramedics, then stepped back as the team took over. Marty clapped me on the back, a grin stretching across his face. "You did good. Not many keep their heads the first time. Most lose it." I didn't say anything, just nodded. It wasn't about doing good. It was about getting the job done. Back at the station, I threw my gear into my locker, feeling the weight of the day settle in my bones. I hadn't realized how heavy the air was, how much tension I'd been carrying until it was over. My arms were shaking, my legs sore from the constant movement, but I was still standing, and I hadn't cracked. I collapsed onto my bunk that night, my body aching from every corner. I thought about how close it had come to falling apart, how easy it would have been to freeze, to panic, but I hadn't. I'd kept going. And in that moment, alone in the quiet of the station, I felt like I was finally starting to belong. 2 years in, I was finally settling into the rhythm of being a firefighter. I'd earned the trust of my crew, worked through the grueling days and nights, and was starting to feel like I belonged. So much so that I'd even been asked to mentor the new recruits. It wasn't an easy job. They didn't just want to know the mechanics of the job, they wanted to see if you could survive it mentally. But I was good at it. The work was hard, but I didn't flinch anymore. Then, one morning, word came down about a new initiative to protect key infrastructure from fire risks: water stations, electrical substations, hospitals. It was a citywide program, big money, high stakes. I was selected to be the lead firefighter liaison to the task force, the person who'd walk city officials and engineers through each site, make sure they understood the risks. It was an honor and a responsibility I took seriously. It felt like the kind of thing that could define my career. As I prepared for the first site walk, I reviewed the blueprints, the maps, the fire safety protocols. I had a plan for every potential issue that could come up. I wasn't going to mess this up. My focus was on the work, on being thorough. Nothing else mattered. Then I saw the list of attendees for the first site tour, and there it was, the one name I never expected to see. My father. It was part of the job, right? City infrastructure heads were involved in these kinds of initiatives. But seeing his name printed out like it was any other name on the list hit me harder than I expected. It had been years since we'd spoken, since he'd ripped that letter up, tossed me out, erased me from everything. I thought about it for a second. Then I shoved it aside. I wasn't going to let it derail me. This wasn't about him. This was about the work. The day of the site tour arrived. I was on point, as always, reviewing the plan one last time, making sure the safety measures were in place. I arrived early, doing what I always did, making sure everything was lined up, ready to go. I didn't know if he was going to recognize me or even if he would care, but I wasn't about to let any of that show. He showed up on time, flanked by aides in tailored suits, looking like he'd stepped off some executive stage. He looked out of place, like a man in a foreign land, but he still carried that same air about him, the one that made everyone else step back. When he stepped out of the car, I didn't flinch. I stayed focused, hands steady as I reviewed the site with the engineers and the safety team. He didn't recognize me at first. I watched him talk to a couple of city officials, shaking hands, giving orders. His eyes didn't land on me at all, and I was fine with that. Then, as he walked past me, he stopped, eyes narrowing, like he was seeing something for the first time. It only took a second, but it was enough. His gaze locked onto mine, and I could see the recognition flash across his face. It was a quick moment, but I felt it. The shift, the way his posture changed, like he suddenly wasn't sure where to look or what to say. "David?" he said, almost as if asking for confirmation, like I wasn't the person standing there right in front of him. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't give him anything. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "It's me." There was a long pause. He looked at me for a second longer, like trying to find a way to make sense of what was happening. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I just turned, motioning for the team to follow me. "Let's get started," I said. I kept my voice even, professional. He didn't say anything else. And neither did I. We went through the tour as planned, my focus entirely on the task at hand. I didn't look at him again. Didn't need to. It wasn't about him. It was about what I was doing here now, and I wasn't going to let him ruin that. The tour ended, and he was gone. A handshake, a few parting words to the officials, and then he disappeared into the car with his aides, the same way he'd come in, distant, removed, a man who didn't even recognize his own son until it was too late. But as the car pulled away, I didn't feel the rage I thought I would. I didn't feel anything. I felt nothing. And that was enough. The meeting was set up in a conference room downtown, packed with city planners, fire officials, and engineers. The air was thick with the usual mix of tension and formality, people with too many opinions and not enough time to share them. I had the floor, and I wasn't about to let anything distract me. I had a job to do, and that job didn't include dealing with whatever had been hanging in the air between me and my father. I walked them through the emergency routes for each key site, pointed out the placements for fire equipment, highlighted potential safety risks. I knew the material backward and forward. Every diagram, every detail. I was prepared. I didn't look at anyone for approval, just kept my eyes on the projector screen, focused on making sure everything was airtight. I felt my dad's eyes on me a few times during the presentation. His gaze was heavy, though, like it was almost impossible for him to just see me like he saw everyone else in the room. But I didn't let myself react. I wasn't there for him. I was there for the task at hand. At some point, he stopped trying to hide it. His glances turned into something a little more pointed, a little more uncomfortable. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to let it shake me. I kept going, explaining the safety protocols, the priorities for hazard mitigation. I spoke with the kind of authority I'd earned, not just from the academy or from training, but from every call I'd made, every life I'd worked to protect. This was my world now. When the meeting ended, I packed up my notes, ready to head out. But I felt him linger behind, his footsteps quiet but deliberate as he made his way over to where I was standing. For a second, I thought about leaving, pretending I didn't hear him. But I didn't. He cleared his throat. "Didn't think I'd ever see you here," he said. There was no surprise in his voice, just that flat tone I'd known for years. I didn't look up from the table as I responded, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing my eyes. "Didn't think you'd ever look." He hesitated, like he wasn't sure what to say next. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe he wanted to defend himself. I didn't care. His words didn't mean anything to me anymore. "David," he started, but I cut him off before he could finish. "This is my job. That's all," I said, keeping my voice even, sharp, no emotion, just the truth. He looked at me, and I saw it. Whatever defenses he had left crumbled in that moment. He looked smaller, like he was trying to figure out how to explain all the years he'd missed. But it was too late for that. He had nothing left to offer me. He nodded once, stiffly, his face hardening again. He didn't try to say anything else, just turned and walked away, the sound of his shoes echoing on the polished floor. I stayed in the room a few moments longer, feeling the weight of it all settle in my chest. The room, full of professionals, was silent now. I could hear the low hum of the air conditioning, the soft shuffle of papers being picked up, but none of it felt real. When I finally left, I didn't look back. The infrastructure safety program kept me busy, reviewing building reports, contractor records, and hazard maps for each of the key sites. It was hours of paperwork, dry as hell, but it was important work. The whole point was to catch any risks before they became fires. I didn't mind it much. It felt like a way to keep making a difference, even when I wasn't out on the trucks. But one afternoon, as I was going through the contractor records for an old water station, I noticed something off. His name was there, my father's, tied to several contracts with companies flagged for repeated violations. Nothing huge at first glance, but enough to raise a red flag. Companies with poor safety records, repeated inspections that came up with issues that should have been dealt with, but hadn't been. I double-checked everything, made sure I wasn't missing something. The paperwork didn't lie. His name was attached to these contracts, these failures. It wasn't personal, I told myself. This wasn't about him. This was about doing my job. Fire risk mitigation was supposed to be about safety, and if that meant bringing his name into it, so be it. I wasn't going to turn a blind eye just because he was my father. I included the findings in my official report, every last detail. The contractors, the violations, the delayed inspections, the ignored recommendations. It all went in. The city couldn't ignore it. Not now. Within a couple of days, word came down. All upcoming infrastructure tours were halted, and every contract under his oversight would be reevaluated. It wasn't my decision, but it was the right one. I just did the paperwork. I didn't tell him. I didn't owe him an explanation. I turned in the folder like I always did. Meticulous, thorough, professional. It was just another day. I grabbed my things and left the office, heading back to the station to get on with the next shift. The weight of what I'd done felt distant, buried under the noise of the sirens and the work ahead. That night, as I sat in the break room, my phone buzzed. A text. I opened it. "You didn't have to do that." I didn't even think twice. I didn't need to respond. I just deleted it. The phone buzzed again, but I left it on the table. I didn't owe him anything, not anymore. The next call came in a few minutes later, a fire in an old building downtown. I stood up, grabbed my gear. The text didn't matter. The job did. Always had. A week later, we were called to a nursing home on the east side, an electrical fire in the wing that housed residents with mobility issues. By the time we arrived, the whole east wing was filled with smoke, alarms screaming in the background. I didn't hesitate. I was the first one through the door, moving fast, getting my bearings. I knew the layout of the place from the building reports, but nothing prepares you for the real thing. "Stay close," I called out to my team, Tommy, Marco, and Sarah. We split up, clearing rooms one by one, guiding the residents out as quickly as we could. The smoke was thick, choking, making it harder to see. My lungs burned with every breath, but I didn't slow down. We couldn't afford to. In one of the rooms, an elderly man was sitting in a chair, terrified, unable to move. His legs weren't working, and the smoke was so thick I could barely make out his face. "Hey, we're getting you out," I said, my voice firm. Marco and Tommy helped lift him, carefully moving him toward the stairs. The smoke was thick, and the walls felt like they were closing in. We had to move fast, but the man's weight was a problem. I wasn't going to risk dropping him, so we carried him down 2 flights of stairs. We got him out to the ambulance, and the paramedics took over. I didn't stop, didn't even look back. We still had more to do. We cleared the last few rooms, made sure everyone was accounted for, and finally, the fire department brought it under control. I could feel the weight of the adrenaline, the exhaustion of what we had just done. But I wasn't done yet. Back at the station, I peeled off my soaked gear, my face covered in soot. I felt like I'd been through a war, my whole body aching from the effort. But I'd done it. We'd done it. As I sat down at the table, the call log was in front of me. I couldn't help it. I glanced down. My name was on it, under Incident Commander. I stared at it for a moment, the recognition settling in. It wasn't the first time I'd been in charge of a call, but it felt different this time. This time, it meant something. I thought about the letter, about how he'd torn it up, about how he'd said I'd never make it. But here I was, I had made it. I smiled to myself quietly for a second. That letter didn't get me here. I did.